My wife keeps talking about our getaway trip to Dubai, but I just picked up a third shift at Burger King. I never told Elizabeth I lost my job at the tech company. When they laid off our entire department 3 months ago, I just kept putting on my suit every morning and leaving the house at 7:30 like nothing changed. I drive to the library and spend 8 hours applying for jobs that never called back. My severance ran out after the first month, but I kept pretending everything was fine. The lies started small. I told Elizabeth my paycheck was delayed because of some system upgrade. Then I said they were restructuring our pay schedule. She believed me because why wouldn't she? We'd been married for 6 years, and I'd never lied to her about anything bigger than eating the last piece of cake. 2 weeks ago, I finally broke down and took a night shift at Burger King. The manager was this kid named Andrew who graduated high school last year. He trained me on the fryer while explaining how to not burn myself on the grease. I wore a hairnet and tried not to think about my computer science degree gathering dust in our home office. The smell of French fries clung to my clothes so badly, I had to keep a spare set in my car and change at the gas station before going home. Elizabeth started planning this Dubai trip back when I still had my real job. She'd been saving her bonuses from the marketing firm and surprised me with the tickets on our anniversary. 7 nights at the Atlantis Resort with a view of the Palm Jumeirah. She showed me pictures of the underwater suites while I calculated how many burger shifts it would take to pay our mortgage. Last week, things got complicated. Elizabeth's best friend Joanne called while I was at my fake office, also known as the library. She wanted to know if we could switch our Dubai dates because her sister was getting married that same week. Elizabeth called me immediately, super excited about leaving earlier. I made up some story about a big project deadline, but she kept pushing. She said her boss already approved the time off and the hotel had availability. That's when she suggested something that made my stomach drop. She wanted to surprise visit me at work with lunch since I'd been working so hard lately. I panicked and told her we had strict security protocols and visitors weren't allowed in the development area. She got quiet for a moment, then said she understood. The night shifts were killing me. I'd leave the house at 10 p.m. telling Elizabeth I was meeting my coworker Jason for drinks. Then I'd spend 8 hours manning the drive-through window and mopping floors that never seemed to get clean. Andrew started noticing the bags under my eyes and asked if everything was okay at home. I almost laughed at the irony of a teenager worrying about my marriage. Elizabeth's Instagram started filling up with Dubai content. She was posting old photos from travel blogs with captions like, "Can't wait to see this view with my hardworking husband," and "T-5 days until paradise." Her friends kept commenting about how lucky she was to have a man who could provide such amazing experiences. Each heart emoji felt like a punch to my gut. 3 days ago, everything almost fell apart. I forgot to wash my Burger King uniform, and Elizabeth found it in my car when she was looking for her gym bag. She held up the polyester shirt with the logo and just stared at me. I told her I was helping Jason's cousin move and he gave me the shirt so I wouldn't ruin my clothes. She nodded slowly and put it back, but something in her eyes seemed different. Yesterday was supposed to be our last day before Dubai. Elizabeth spent the morning packing while I pretended to take conference calls in our bedroom. She laid out my swimming trunks and summer shirts while talking about the restaurants she wanted to try. I watched her fold my clothes with such care that I almost told her everything right then, but the words wouldn't come out. Then Elizabeth did something weird. She pulled out a second suitcase and started packing another complete set of clothes. When I asked why she needed so much stuff, she just smiled and said, "You never know what you might need in Dubai." She packed enough for 2 weeks, even though we were only going for 7 nights. That evening, Elizabeth made my favorite dinner and opened a bottle of wine. She kept refilling my glass and asking about my project at work. I made up details about coding problems and difficult clients while she nodded along. After the third glass, she mentioned that her friend Jason from college lived in Dubai now and worked at some investment firm. She said maybe we could all get dinner together. Andrew texted me during dessert, asking if I could cover someone's shift. I told Elizabeth it was Jason needing help with something urgent. She said that was fine because she had to run some last-minute errands anyway. As I left for Burger King, I saw her putting on makeup, which seemed strange for shopping at Target. At work, I kept checking my phone, expecting Elizabeth to text about flight details. Instead, there was nothing, just silence. When I got home at 7 a.m., she was already gone. There was a note on the counter that said she went to get her nails done for the trip, but her nail appointment wasn't until tomorrow. I knew because I saw it written on our kitchen calendar. I went to our bedroom to grab some clothes and noticed something that made me freeze. Elizabeth's passport was still in the drawer where we always kept it. Next to it was mine, but both our suitcases were gone. My phone buzzed with a notification. Elizabeth had posted a new Instagram story. It was a selfie from an airplane with the caption, "Dubai, here we come," with a heart emoji. But in the reflection of her sunglasses, I could see the person in the seat next to her. It was Jason from college, the one who worked at the investment firm in Dubai. I sat down on our bed, still wearing my Burger King uniform that smelled like grease and failure. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Elizabeth. "We need to talk when I get back." I stared at those 4 words on my phone screen, while the smell from my uniform made my stomach turn. My thumb hovered over the keyboard to type back, but nothing came out. I kept reading her message over and over like the words might change if I looked hard enough. The grease smell got stronger, and I realized I'd been sitting here for who knows how long. 10 minutes passed before I could even move. My brain kept trying to find some way this all made sense. Maybe Elizabeth had a second passport I didn't know about. Maybe that plane photo was from an old trip she never posted. I grabbed my laptop from the nightstand and opened Google. My fingers shook as I typed "Dubai entry requirements for U.S. citizens" into the search bar. The official government site loaded, and there it was in black and white. Valid passport required for all international travel to UAE. No exceptions. I clicked through 3 more sites just to be sure, but they all said the same thing. The denial I'd been holding on to crumbled like wet paper. I opened my messages and started typing to Elizabeth. Hey, where's your passport? Delete. I saw your passport is still here. Delete. How did you get on a plane without... Delete. I typed and deleted 5 different versions before giving up. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I decided to just wait and watch her Instagram for more clues. The uniform stuck to my skin as I stood up. I peeled off the polyester shirt and pants and threw them in the hamper. The smell wouldn't leave, though. It was in my hair and on my skin like it had soaked into my pores. 3 months of lies sitting heavy on my chest, and now I knew she'd been lying too. I looked around our bedroom for what else was missing. Both suitcases were gone from the closet. Her makeup bag wasn't on the dresser. The phone charger she always forgot was missing from her nightstand. Even her favorite pillow was gone. She definitely went somewhere real, just not where she said. I opened the desk drawer and found our anniversary trip folder. The Dubai brochures were still there with her handwritten notes in the margins. Can't wait, with little hearts drawn around it. I remembered watching her pack clothes for 2 weeks when the trip was only 7 nights. She'd smiled and said, "You never know what you might need." The pieces started clicking together like a puzzle I should have seen earlier. My phone rang and Andrew's name popped up. I let it go to voicemail, then called back. "Hey man, I'm really sick," I said. "Think I've got the flu or something." He sounded worried and asked if I needed anything. I told him no, and that I'd probably be out for a few days. Another lie added to the pile, but what was one more at this point? I hung up and opened our banking app on my phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through the recent transactions. I was looking for airport parking or an Uber to the airport. There was a charge from yesterday at a gas station near our house. A coffee shop purchase from this morning. But no airport parking. No Uber. No taxi. Then I remembered the Dubai tickets were bought months ago when I still had my real job. Back when we could actually afford them. She'd been planning this trip since before I got laid off. The thought made me want to throw up. I scrolled back further in the transactions. There were charges from restaurants I didn't recognize. A hotel bar downtown from 3 days ago. Small purchases here and there that didn't match the stories she'd told me. Each one was like finding another crack in the foundation of our marriage. My phone buzzed with another Instagram notification. Elizabeth had posted a photo of a fancy breakfast with the caption, "Room service in paradise." But when I zoomed in on the orange juice glass, I could see a reflection. It wasn't a hotel room. It looked like an apartment with regular furniture and a TV in the background. The comments started rolling in from her friends. "So jealous. And living your best life. And you deserve this." Each one felt like someone twisting a knife. I kept scrolling through her posts looking for more clues. In one selfie, I could see a building in the background that looked familiar. I grabbed my laptop again and searched for hotels in our city. After clicking through dozens of sites, I found it. The Marriott downtown. The same hotel where her company held their holiday party last year. My chest got tight as more pieces fell into place. She wasn't in Dubai. She was 20 minutes away in a hotel with her college friend Jason. The one who supposedly lived in Dubai but whose LinkedIn profile I'd just checked showed he worked at a firm right here in town. I wanted to drive there right now and confront them, but my legs wouldn't work. Instead, I sat on our bed in my underwear smelling like French fries and failure while my wife pretended to be on the other side of the world. The house felt too quiet without her here. Even when she was lying to me, at least she was here. Now I had nothing but empty rooms and the smell of grease that wouldn't wash off. I thought about calling someone, but who would I even call? I'd isolated myself so much while hiding my job loss that I didn't have anyone left to talk to. The mortgage payment would bounce in 3 days. I'd been juggling credit cards to keep the lights on, and now my wife was gone, pretending to be in Dubai while she was really just across town starting a new life without me. I grabbed my phone and typed out a text to Joanne, asking if she ever figured out that Dubai date change with her sister's wedding thing. My hands were shaking. So bad I had to retype it 3 times before it made sense. I waited for those 3 dots to show she was typing back, but nothing came. Hours went by and still nothing. Which was weird because Joanne always texted back right away. Even when she was in meetings, she'd send a quick emoji or something. The silence made my chest feel tight, like when you're underwater too long. Around midnight, I opened my laptop and started typing an email to Elizabeth telling her everything about losing my job 3 months ago. I wrote about the library and the fake conference calls and the Burger King uniform she found in my car. But every sentence felt pointless when she was 20 minutes away doing whatever with Jason, so I just stared at the cursor blinking on the screen. I deleted it all and closed the laptop. I couldn't sleep, so I just laid there in our bed that still smelled like her shampoo and watched the ceiling fan go around and around. My phone buzzed at 6 a.m. with an automated email from our bank saying the mortgage payment failed to process due to insufficient funds. The red text about late fees and credit score impacts made my stomach hurt worse than spoiled milk. I'd been moving money around between credit cards to keep things going, but I'd finally run out of room to juggle. I called the bank's automated system and listened to it tell me our payment was now 30 days overdue, which I already knew. My phone rang while I was making instant coffee and Joanne's name popped up, but she didn't answer when I called back. She left a voicemail instead with her usual happy voice asking me to give her a call when I got a chance. But something about how she said it sounded fake, like when people smile while they're crying. I pulled up Elizabeth's Instagram story again and looked closer at the details. The geotag just said traveling with one of those generic airplane stickers instead of the specific Dubai location tags she always used when we went places. She was the type who tagged every restaurant and tourist spot to show off where she was. This generic tag meant she was hiding something on purpose. I forced myself to get dressed in regular clothes instead of staying in yesterday's Burger King uniform and drove to the library. The same parking spot I'd been using for 3 months was open like it was waiting for me. I sat at the same computer and opened the same job sites and filled out the same applications that never went anywhere. Each one asked for salary requirements, and I kept lowering my number like I was bidding against myself. I applied for help desk jobs and customer service positions, and even data entry work that paid half what I used to make. At least I was doing something instead of just sitting at home smelling like French fries. My phone rang and Andrew's name showed up, which surprised me since he never called during the day. He asked if I was feeling better, and said he could cover my shifts this week if I needed time to deal with whatever was going on. His voice had that careful tone people use when they think you might break. The weird part was how much better it made me feel to have this 18-year-old kid actually care about whether I was okay when my own wife was lying about being in another country. I told him I'd be back tomorrow night and he said cool and to take care of myself. Another email popped up while I was still at the library, this one from my old company about COBRA health insurance continuation. The monthly premium to keep our coverage was $1,847, which was more than our mortgage payment. Without a job, I couldn't afford it, but without insurance, we were one emergency room visit away from bankruptcy. I added it to the list of impossible problems I couldn't solve. I updated my LinkedIn profile to show the green Open to Work banner, and within minutes the messages started coming in. Old coworkers and random recruiters sending those empty messages about keeping my chin up and how the right opportunity would come along soon. Their cheerful encouragement felt worse than if they'd just ignored me completely because they had no idea what it was really like to wake up every day knowing you're failing at everything. One message stood out though from a former coworker making a joke about the strict security at our old office building and how he couldn't even get his wife past the lobby last week when she brought him lunch. The same security I'd lied to Elizabeth about actually existed, which felt like the universe was laughing at me for telling the truth by accident. I sat in that library surrounded by people studying and working on their laptops and felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The next morning I couldn't stay in that library another minute, so I drove to my old office building downtown just to see if maybe there was some mistake and they'd want me back. The security guard at the front desk didn't even recognize me after 3 years of saying good morning every day. I walked over to the directory board next to the elevators and scanned the list of names under our floor number. My name wasn't there anymore. They'd already replaced the little plastic strip with someone else's name like I'd never existed at all. Standing in that lobby, watching people in suits rush past me to jobs they still had made me feel like I was visiting my own grave. I left before anyone I knew could see me, and went back to the library where at least nobody cared that I was a failure. There was a bright yellow flyer on the bulletin board near the computers advertising a job fair next week at the convention center. Entry-level positions, it said in big letters with no experience necessary written underneath. 3 months ago, I would have laughed at the idea of going to something like that with my degree and experience, but now I grabbed one of the little tabs with the website and stuffed it in my pocket. The job fair was packed with people who looked just as desperate as I felt. I stood in line for 40 minutes to talk to a recruiter named Miriam Parker, who worked for a staffing agency. She looked at my resume and didn't pretend I was going to get back to my old salary anytime soon. She told me straight up that with the gap in employment and the market being what it was, I should consider help desk positions that paid about half what I used to make. She had one opening that could start in 2 weeks if I was interested, and might lead to something better in a year or two if I proved myself. I took her card, and thanked her for being honest, instead of giving me false hope like everyone else. That evening, I sat at our kitchen table with all our bills spread out, and actually made a real budget for the first time since losing my job. The numbers were worse than I'd let myself believe. We were 3 months behind on the car payment and 2 months behind on credit cards, and even if I got that help desk job tomorrow, it would take at least 6 months to catch up if we cut everything extra from our spending. My phone rang while I was adding up the credit card minimums, and it was Raymond Gutierrez from our bank calling about the failed mortgage payment. I expected him to threaten foreclosure, but instead, he walked me through applying for a hardship deferment that would pause our payments for 3 months while I got back on my feet. He spent 20 minutes on the phone explaining all the paperwork I'd need, and even gave me his direct extension so I wouldn't have to wait on hold next time. His matter-of-fact kindness without any judgment made me feel more human than I'd felt in weeks. After I hung up, I went online to check our joint credit card statement to add it to my budget, and noticed a charge from 2 days ago at the Marriott downtown for $87 from their rooftop bar. My stomach dropped because I recognized that hotel. Elizabeth's company held their quarterly meetings there, and she'd taken me to their holiday party at that same rooftop bar last December. She was supposed to be in Dubai, but here was a charge from downtown posted while she was supposedly on a plane over the Atlantic. I opened Instagram and searched for Jason from college since Elizabeth had mentioned him at dinner before she left. His profile was public, and right there in his most recent posts was a photo from yesterday at a rooftop pool with the city skyline in the background. The location tag said Marriott Downtown, and the caption said something about afternoon meetings and evening cocktails. The pieces clicked together in my mind with a clarity that made me want to throw up. I thought back to 3 days ago, when Elizabeth found my Burger King shirt in the car, and the way she looked at me when I made up that stupid story about helping someone move. She knew I was lying. She'd probably known for weeks that something was wrong. We'd been testing each other with little lies and watching for reactions without either of us admitting what we were really doing. My phone rang and it was Joanne calling for the 3rd time today. I finally answered and she didn't even say hello before launching into an apology about how she couldn't keep lying to me anymore. She told me Elizabeth had suspected I'd lost my job weeks ago when my stories about work stopped making sense and the bills started piling up. The whole Dubai story was Elizabeth's way of getting space to figure out what to do about our marriage, and she'd been staying at the Marriott downtown since yesterday morning. Joanne said Elizabeth made her promise not to tell me, but she couldn't stand watching us both suffer through this mess. After Joanne hung up, I sat there for a long time staring at my pathetic budget and thinking about how we'd gotten here. I opened my laptop and searched for therapists who took sliding scale payments and found Vivian Shields, who had an office 20 minutes away and charged based on income. I sent her an email asking for an appointment as soon as possible, because if I was going to fix any of this disaster, I had to start with figuring out why I'd let it get so bad in the first place. 3 days later, I walked into Vivian's office on the second floor of a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax place. The waiting room had those fake plants that collect dust and magazines from 2 years ago, but I didn't care because at least I was doing something. She opened her door right at 2 o'clock, and I followed her into a small room with 2 chairs and a box of tissues on the side table. I sat down and started talking before she even asked me anything. I told her about the layoff and the lies and the Burger King job and how I couldn't tell Elizabeth because admitting I'd failed meant admitting I wasn't the man she married. Vivian wrote something on her notepad while I talked about how my dad always said a man provides for his family and how losing my job felt like losing everything that made me worth something. She asked me what scared me most about telling Elizabeth the truth, and I said it was seeing disappointment in her eyes, because once she saw who I really was without the tech job and the good salary, she'd realize she married wrong. We spent the rest of the hour talking about pride and fear and how they worked together to keep us stuck in bad patterns. When I left, I had another appointment for next week and homework to write down 3 times I'd chosen pride over honesty. My phone buzzed while I was walking to my car, and it was Elizabeth asking if I'd been watering her plants and whether the house was okay. I stared at the message for a full minute, wanting to type everything right there in the parking lot, but instead I just wrote back that the plants were fine and left it at that. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Miriam Parker with the subject line, "Help desk opening, immediate start available," and my hands shook as I opened it. The position was entry-level at a company called Tech Forward Solutions, and the pay was $22 an hour, which was less than half what I used to make, but it had health insurance and a 401k match after 6 months. She'd already talked to the hiring manager about me, and they wanted to schedule an interview for Friday if I was interested. I typed back yes immediately, and then sat there looking at the email thinking about how $22 an hour meant I'd need to work 50 hours just to make what I used to make in a day. That night at Burger King, I was on my break eating cold fries in the back when Andrew sat down across from me and started talking about his mom. He said she got laid off from her accounting job last year and didn't tell his dad for 2 months because she was embarrassed, and it almost ruined their marriage when he found out. His mom wished she'd just been honest from the start, because the lying hurt more than the job loss ever could have, and now they go to counseling every week to rebuild trust. I nodded along thinking about how this 19-year-old kid was giving me marriage advice that I desperately needed to hear. After my shift, I went home and sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and started writing everything I needed to tell Elizabeth. I wrote about the morning they called us all into the conference room and told us the entire department was eliminated effective immediately. I wrote about the severance package and how I thought I'd find something new before it ran out. I wrote about the library and the hundreds of applications and the rejections and the silence. I wrote about Burger King and Andrew and the smell of grease and the shame of wearing a hairnet at 34 years old. I wrote about the mortgage and the bills and the budget I'd made showing exactly how bad things were. When I finished, I had 3 pages front and back, and my hand was cramping, but everything was there in black and white. The next afternoon, I drove downtown and parked across from the Marriott where Elizabeth was staying. I sat in my car for 20 minutes watching people go in and out of the lobby and thinking about walking in there and demanding to talk to her, but that wasn't fair when she'd asked for space. Instead, I pulled out my phone and typed a simple message saying I was ready to talk whenever she was, and that I had things I needed to tell her with no demands or accusations, just readiness to be honest. I hit send and drove away without waiting to see if she'd respond. Back home, I pulled out every financial document I could find and spread them across the dining room table. The severance letter from 3 months ago went in one pile with my final pay stub showing the lump sum they'd given me. The job applications went in another pile with the few rejection emails I'd actually received instead of just silence. The budget I'd made went in the middle, showing our expenses and income with the huge gap between them. The mortgage statements showing the missed payments went next to the hardship application I'd filled out with Raymond's help. Looking at it all laid out like that made it real in a way that felt both terrifying and relieving. 2 days later, Raymond called to tell me the mortgage deferment had been approved for 3 months, which meant we wouldn't lose the house immediately. I wrote the restart date in red on 3 different calendars and set reminders on my phone for 2 weeks before, and 1 week before, and 3 days before, because I couldn't let this slip through the cracks like everything else had. That evening, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and practiced what I'd say to Elizabeth out loud. I started with all the excuses about the job market and the economy, but stopped and started over with just the facts. I lost my job 3 months ago, and I lied about it because I was scared and ashamed, and I'm sorry. I said it over and over until the words stopped feeling like broken glass in my mouth. The interview confirmation email from Tech Forward came through while I was at Burger King, and I took my break early to call and confirm Friday at 10 in the morning. After my shift, I spent 3 hours researching the company and reading every page of their website, and writing down questions to ask that would show I'd done my homework, even if this was just help desk work that any high school kid could probably do. Thursday morning, I drove to Vivian's office for my second appointment and sat in the same chair as last week while she pulled out her yellow notepad. She asked how the week went, and I told her about the interview coming up and how I'd been preparing even though it was just basic tech support work. She nodded and wrote something down, then asked why I kept saying just when I talked about the job, and that got us into this whole thing about how I'd tied my entire identity to my salary and job title. I spent 20 years climbing the corporate ladder, and now I was back at the bottom, and it felt like I'd failed at being a man or a husband or just a basic adult who could pay bills. Vivian had me do this exercise where I listed all the things I was besides my job, and at first I couldn't think of anything. But then slowly I came up with stuff like being someone who shows up for work even when it's hard, and someone who's trying to fix his mistakes instead of running away. The session ended with her teaching me this breathing thing, where you count to 4 on the inhale and hold for 4, and exhale for 4, and it's supposed to help when things get overwhelming. That night at Burger King, this woman came through the drive-thru and ordered large fries, and when she got them, she started screaming that they were cold and threw them back through the window at Andrew. She was yelling about how we were all idiots and couldn't do the simplest job right, and demanding to speak to the owner while Andrew just stood there covered in salt and grease trying to stay calm. I started to feel that familiar shame rising up like when I thought about Elizabeth finding out about my job. But then I remembered the breathing thing Vivian taught me. 4 in, hold 4, 4 out. The woman kept screaming, but it stopped feeling personal because she didn't know anything about me or my degree or what brought me here. Andrew handled it perfectly and gave her fresh fries and a refund, and after she drove off, he just shrugged and said some people are having their own bad days, and we happened to be in the path. Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed while I was mopping the floor, and it was Elizabeth texting that she'd be back from her trip Friday evening, but wanted to wait until Saturday morning to talk when we were both rested. The waiting felt like torture, but at least now there was an actual date and time instead of this endless wondering. I spent the rest of my shift thinking about what Saturday would bring and whether we'd still be married by Sunday. When I got home from work, I looked around the house and realized how messy everything had gotten while I'd been falling apart. There were old job applications scattered on the dining table, and empty coffee cups everywhere, and dirty clothes piled on the bedroom floor. I spent all of Friday cleaning everything from top to bottom, vacuuming carpets that hadn't been touched in weeks, and scrubbing the bathroom until it looked like when we first moved in. I washed all my clothes, including the Burger King uniform, and instead of hiding it in the back of the closet, I folded it carefully and left it right on top of the dresser where Elizabeth would see it the moment she walked in. If we were going to have an honest conversation, then I wanted all the evidence of my lies right there in the open. That evening at work, I found Andrew in the break room doing inventory and told him I might need to change my schedule soon, depending on how things went with the tech job. He looked up from his clipboard and said no problem, and then asked if I'd be willing to let him use me as a reference for his community college application. I almost laughed at the irony, but then he said I was one of the most reliable employees he'd had, and that I never complained even when things got rough and always showed up on time. He pulled out this form and had me write down my name and phone number as a professional reference, and watching this 19-year-old kid treat me with that kind of respect made something shift inside me. After my shift, I sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and wrote down the 5 main things I needed to tell Elizabeth. First was the job loss 3 months ago and how they eliminated our whole department. Second was all the lies about paychecks and system upgrades and every other excuse I'd made up. Third was our actual financial situation with the missed mortgage payments and the deferment I'd gotten. Fourth was the Burger King job and how I'd been working nights to try to bring in something. Fifth was what I was doing to fix things with the therapy and the job interviews and the budget I'd made. Having it all written down in order made it feel less like a disaster and more like a problem with actual steps to solve it. Friday night, I got into bed at a reasonable hour instead of staying up until dawn worrying about every possible outcome. I set my alarm for 8 in the morning and turned off my phone and actually fell asleep within an hour instead of staring at the ceiling. Saturday morning, I woke up before the alarm and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my list waiting for Elizabeth. She walked through the door at 9:30 looking tired, but put together in jeans and the sweater I'd gotten her for Christmas. She set down her purse and looked at me for a long moment, then said she needed to tell me something first. She'd been staying at the downtown hotel with Jason from college, and things had gotten complicated when she felt like I'd abandoned her with all my lies and secrets. She said the lines got blurry and she wasn't proud of it, but she needed me to know before we talked about anything else. I sat there trying to process what she was saying while she waited for me to respond, but all I could think was that we'd both been lying to each other for months. Then I started talking and told her everything from the beginning. The layoff announcement in the conference room, and how they gave us 2 weeks' notice and a severance package. The library days where I'd sit at the same computer from 8 to 5 applying for jobs that never responded. The Burger King application I filled out in desperation, and Andrew training me on the fryer and the drive-thru. Every single lie I'd told her about delayed paychecks and system upgrades and security protocols. I apologized without trying to explain why I'd done it, or make excuses about protecting her or being ashamed. When I finished, she asked to see the financial documents, so I got the folder I'd prepared and spread everything out on the table. The severance letter, and the final pay stub, and the bank statements showing the missed payments and the mortgage deferment approval, and the budget showing our income and expenses. She went through each page carefully, and asked questions about the timeline and the amounts and what happened to our savings. I explained how I'd used the severance to cover the first month, and then our savings for the second month, and then started missing payments when everything ran out. She looked at the hardship application I'd filed, and the 3-month deferment we'd gotten, and the interview confirmation for the tech support job. The whole time she stayed calm and focused on the numbers instead of getting emotional, and I couldn't tell if that was good or bad. She put the papers down and looked at me for a long time without saying anything. I watched her fingers tap on the mortgage deferment form while she seemed to be doing math in her head. She stood up and walked to the window, and I could see her shoulders moving like she was taking deep breaths. After about 5 minutes, she came back to the table and said we needed to separate for 3 months while we both figured things out through therapy. The words hit me, but I nodded because what else could I do? She pulled out her phone and started looking up therapists covered by her insurance and found one named Vivian Shields who had openings. I wrote down the number while she kept scrolling through names for herself. We spent the next 2 hours going through our bank accounts on her laptop. She opened a new checking account in her name, and I did the same on my phone. We calculated who owed what for the mortgage and utilities and set up separate automatic payments from our individual accounts. The joint credit card got frozen right there at the table, with both of us watching the screen turn from active to suspended. She made a spreadsheet for household bills, and we agreed to weekly emails about logistics stuff like trash pickup and lawn care. When I asked about Jason, she said she wouldn't see him during our separation period. I wanted to ask more, but she was already moving on to dividing up our streaming subscriptions. That night I slept on the couch and heard her crying in our bedroom, but we both stayed in our separate spaces. The next morning I grabbed my phone and sent Joanne a text thanking her for pushing Elizabeth to be honest. I kept it short, and didn't ask any questions about what she knew or when she knew it. Joanne texted back with a heart emoji and said she hoped we'd work things out. 3 days later, I had the help desk interview at a company downtown. The interviewer asked about my employment gap, and I told him straight up about the layoff and taking time to reassess my career goals. He nodded like he'd heard it before and asked about my technical skills. We went through some basic troubleshooting scenarios, and I answered everything correctly. At the end, he offered me a 3-month contract position starting at $25 an hour. Not great money, but better than Burger King, and it was back in tech. I accepted on the spot and we shook hands. That evening, I drove to Burger King for my shift and found Andrew in the office doing inventory. I told him I got a new job and needed to give my 2 weeks' notice. He stood up and shook my hand like we were business partners instead of manager and fry cook. He said he was proud of me for getting back on my feet and handed me a voucher for a free meal on my last day. I thanked him for everything and meant it. The kid had shown me more respect than most of my old coworkers ever did. I worked my shifts for the next 2 weeks and tried not to think about Elizabeth packing boxes at home. She found a sublet apartment closer to her office, and I helped her load her car with clothes and books. We didn't talk much during the loading, but we were polite like strangers helping each other move. I found my own place through Craigslist, a studio apartment above a pizza shop that smelled like garlic all the time. The landlord wanted first and last month plus security, but I managed it with my first help desk paycheck. I set up automatic transfers to cover my half of the mortgage, even though I wasn't living there anymore. The apartment came furnished with a bed and a desk and not much else. I bought sheets at Target and a coffee maker from Goodwill. Living alone felt weird after 6 years of marriage, but I got used to the quiet. My first therapy session with Vivian was awkward as hell. She had this small office with too many plants and a white noise machine that sounded like rain. She asked me to tell my story from the beginning, and I talked for 40 minutes straight about the layoff and the lies and Elizabeth's affair. She took notes on a yellow pad and nodded but didn't interrupt. When I finished, she asked how I wanted to use our time together. I said I needed to learn how to communicate better, and she said we could work on that. We spent the next few sessions practicing what she called boundary setting and active listening. She had me write out what I wanted to say to Elizabeth during our weekly check-ins, and we'd role-play different responses. It felt silly at first, but it helped when Elizabeth and I had our actual calls. We kept them short and focused on practical stuff like the mortgage payment clearing or the water heater making weird noises. 3 weeks went by fast with the new routine. I'd wake up in my studio apartment and make instant coffee before walking to the help desk job. 8 hours of password resets and software installations, then back to my apartment to study. I'd signed up for an online IT certification course and spent my evenings watching videos about network protocols and security basics. The pizza smell from downstairs made me hungry all the time, so I ate a lot of ramen to save money. Elizabeth and I texted maybe twice a week about house stuff and nothing else. We were both being honest for the first time in months, even if honest meant basically being strangers who shared a mortgage. All right, that's all from me today, folks. Thanks for letting me poke around and throw some questions out there with you all. It's always fun hanging out like this. Subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for sticking with me through all these strange twists and turns today. Definitely made it more interesting sharing the questions together. Like the video, it helps more than you think.